It's every Tuesday and Thursday at 4 p.m. and it's a great way to learn something. It's a great way to connect with the community and say hello. You'll find a very active, friendly community here in the comments. And in this session, we are going to be talking about rhythm. I'm going to be doing a few sessions on rhythm, and I would say that rhythm is potentially the most important factor when it comes to sight reading and ensemble playing. As guitarists, classical guitarists who often spend time alone, we don't get to deal with rhythm in a structured and accountable way. I'll say that very often. We actually have to be left to our own devices to make sure we are checking in on our rhythm, and that's exactly what we're going to be talking about in today's session, making sure that we can find exact rhythms. So I hope you'll enjoy this session. There's Michelangelo. The comments are coming in all the way from Cairo. Great to have you with us again. There's Cipriano. Some great names, by the way. Michelangelo and Cipriano. I mean, come on. One great artist and one great restaurant. No, sorry. Great names. Brent from Pennsylvania. Robert Guerrero. Thank you for tuning in. Wonderful. It's great to see everyone coming in. So we're going to just chat for a few minutes. This often takes like 5 to 7 minutes for people to come in. And I hope you're all doing well. It's been another great week at CGC. We actually redesigned the homepage at Classical Guitar Corner. Not the homepage, the entire website actually, of classicalguitarcorner.com. It's going to be hopefully a lot easier for people to find what they're looking for. We have a lot of material we've written and created over the years, and hopefully we'll be organizing that material in a much more logical, user-friendly way. And I think the site will be much faster now too, so I hope you'll find that it's faster. So lots of people tuning in. Stephen, hi, great to have you with us. I think Michelangelo. Is it Michelangelo or Michelangelo? How would you like me to say that? I cook better than I paint, he says. Cindy from California. Jeff's there from the Bay Area. Stephen from Colorado. Renee, Doug, great to have you here again. There's Alan. So some of you are on Facebook, some of you are on YouTube. The vast majority of people, I would say, are on the YouTube channel. And that's where, if people have asked sometimes in the comments after the fact, where's everyone commenting from? I don't see them. Well, in fact, it's people over on the YouTube channel, classicalguitarcorner.com. YouTube. Anyway, if you put in Classical Guitar Corner in YouTube, you'll find the channel. And I think if you subscribe, then you'll be able to get notifications when we start going live. So it's a really nice way to do that. And also, I've never asked this before because I'm just not, my focus is not very rarely on this kind of thing. But I think if you hit the like on the video, it actually gives us a good reach on the interwebs, as they say. So you can like this live stream if you like it. I don't know. I found myself watching other live streams these days, and I find that it's really quite nice. So I enjoy doing them. I'm actually going to be doing one with my wife Evita on Wednesday for her dance school, and we're going to be talking about practice. We're going to be talking about applying our musical approach to practice, which I think is quite refined actually. There's a long tradition and pedagogy about practice. And we're going to be talking about how that applies to Lindy Hopper's dances. And I think there's a very different world of approach there where, it's social, it's improvised, nowhere near as structured as we approach classical music. So I hope I'll be able to offer some insights there, just as she offered us a great session of stretching the other day, last Thursday. Someone must have come in just when there was a dance video showing on the screen, and they wrote, "What on earth is this doing on a guitar channel?" It's really a lovely, first of all, obviously stretching plays a wonderful part in our lives of maintaining our first and foremost instrument, our bodies. But also, classical guitarists, I can't speak for other instruments, so I'm not going to make a generalization, but I will say that we love our instruments so much and our music and our repertoire that we often focus on classical guitar and somewhat classical guitar alone. But the musical world brings in all sorts of inspiration and information from all different walks of life, from dance, from other art forms, from visual painting, from other styles of music and musicians. And then, of course, you can even just bring in more even esoteric things, maybe poetry or drama or rhetoric. So, all sorts of things you can actually learn and bring that into your music, and they will make an impact. Dancing, for instance, will impact the topic of today's stream, which is rhythm. So Evita, my wife, is an excellent, outstanding rhythmist. I'm envious of her ability to just stay in the pocket. And when we used to live in a tiny little apartment, which is not much bigger than this space I'm in right now, obviously I would practice at one end of the room and she'd be on the other end doing whatever. And I could tell if I was in time because she would start bopping. She physicalizes, it's part of just who she is. The rhythm and music goes through her body. And I could tell when I was playing in time because she would start moving. And other times she'd be like, a little off. So we'll talk about that a little bit. I believe, so I asked if it's Michelangelo or, I think he's saying Michelangelo, not Michelangelo. Great. Michelangelo it is, I believe. I almost thought for a second that you wrote, I'm going to put this up. I almost thought for a second it was the same word, and which wouldn't have helped me. But I believe Michelangelo would be the pronunciation of the first one. So, Eduardo from Mexico, great to see you. Eduardo, I hope you're well. Carrie Conroy from DC. Nicoletta Tedesco. Now, for everybody who's going to be in the duet session on Sunday, a little shout out that, or a little canary told me, as in Nikki told me, Nikki's birthday is on Sunday. So maybe you might want to wish her a happy birthday coming up for Sunday. It's always fun to celebrate. And Nikki will actually be teaching a coaching session and the duet member challenge there on Sunday. And she said she was happy to have company during this time on her birthday. So maybe we can wish her a happy birthday on Sunday. All right. It's 4:10. It sounds like it's time to get into it. So, have a little sip of water. So rhythm is an aspect of our playing that is in more need of attention than other musical aspects, I would say. Often when we think about sight reading, we think about where are the notes on the fingerboard as opposed to what rhythm are they in. But in my experience working with students and also doing research for my doctoral thesis on sight reading, rhythm is going to be the most important aspect to have some fluency in the reading process as opposed to having the correct pitches. If you think of it in an ensemble context, playing with others, if you play the wrong pitch, if you play the right pitch at the wrong time, it's 100% incorrect. It won't work. So you're reading the correct pitch, but you're playing it at the wrong time. Now, if you play the incorrect pitch at the correct time, you kind of got 50% of the material there. You've got the rhythm in place. Maybe the pitch is wrong, but I would argue that the rhythm is paramount. It's the most important aspect when it comes to playing ensemble music. And therefore, we should actually give more time, I believe, as classical guitarists to developing our rhythmic skills and rhythmic reading ability. When I was doing my doctoral thesis, I looked into ways of compartmentalizing certain aspects of music, so rhythm being one of them. When we sight read, we use pattern recognition a lot to process the information that we're seeing on the page. So just as when we read out of a book a long word that perhaps we haven't come across before, like phenomenology or neologism, right? we would probably pass it out by going phenomenology, and we get it, and we said it a few times, and maybe if we've used it in context, then it becomes part of our vocabulary, and we recognize it as a pattern, as a visual cue. We can even get larger visual cues, strings of words, whole sentences, cliches that we can read and then process it as a chunk of information instead of reading each word individually, or even each syllable and breaking down those words. The same thing happens with music. Good sight readers will process information in chunks. I actually used to work way back when in the Wigmore Hall. I studied in London at the Royal Academy of Music for a time, and to make money, I worked as an usher and a page turner at Wigmore Hall. And on Sundays, they had these concerts, chamber music concerts, that often had a piano player on there. And so I don't know why I volunteered myself, but I did, and I was the page turner for these events. And it was amazing to see both the difference, but also just the skill of the piano players who were often accompanying other musicians, and how far they read ahead. So as I was turning the pages, I would obviously keep track of the music as best I could. And the piano player would often, if they'd never met me before, so they have no level of confidence, so they would often nod their head when they're ready to turn the page. And what was amazing was some people would nod their head with a couple of measures to go at the end of the page, some with several lines, several systems of music. So we're reading well ahead. Obviously, there might be some memorization in there, but the chunking of that information was vastly different, and it was really interesting. So as we learn some of these rhythms, and I'm going to teach you a very specific technique today called subdivision, and some of you at the Academy already know about it, but it's good to reinforce because it's so useful. As we learn these rhythmic units, we can start treating them as information chunks and grouping them, having pattern recognition in our music, so that we aren't doing the equivalent of marking out each syllable in a word and passing through those words every single time, or rhythms every single time. So let me give you a quick example of where we might be useful today. If this is a rhythm, high tech. If this is a rhythm that can you read this straight away, right? 1, 2, 3, 4. Right? Could you read that at that tempo without any, sort of I don't know what to call it, working through it, figuring it out? If not, then I think working on your rhythmic skill is still going to be a great asset, a good use of your time, right? So this rhythm, especially if you can't read it now, is something that I hope by the end of this session you will be able to read, right? So let's get started. I've made it so that you can see me this time. Hello. Last time it was just I think we ran out of room when I did this whiteboard technique last time. All right, nice and lined up there. So, subdivision is where we take something, let's say we take this line here, and we're going to divide it. The first divide would be in half, right? And then maybe we could add some more divisions, and now we've got 4 divisions, right? So we're dividing something up into sub-parts. Now the same thing can be done with a musical duration. If we have a quarter note or a crotchet, we can divide that into 2 eighth notes or 2 quavers, depending where you are in the country world. Right? You've probably seen these trees of notes where we start with a whole note. Let me just give you a brief rundown. Whole note makes 2 half notes, makes 2 quarter notes. This is a pretty standard rhythmic tree that you may have seen. that can be subdivided into eighth notes, and on we go, right? And it goes down, I would say, to 16th notes would be the most logical one. So each of these durations can be divided into smaller durations. When we come across a rhythm that we need to figure out, we can use subdivision as a guide to make that rhythm make sense. So let's see. Let's start very simple. I'm going to work in 4/4 most of the time today. Common time. Called common time because it's so common. Okay, so this is a pretty straightforward rhythm, I would suggest, and it's going to go 1, dot, 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 dot. I stopped counting the numbers because that's going to be the subdivision. Now, to subdivide this, we are going to take the shortest duration that we find in this passage of music. And so the shortest duration here is the eighth note, right? So there's nothing shorter than that, so there's probably not any reason to go to a shorter duration, of which might be a 16th note. So we can imagine that we have eighth notes all the way along that line up, right? So this gives us a matrix of sorts so that we can plot our notes on this matrix and be very confident about where they fall. This note lines up with that eighth note, these line up, and these line up. All right, so if we have this underlying subdivision, then, I'm going to tap with the pen, then we can play our rhythm over the top of that and line it up very exactly. So I'm going to be tapping my subdivision with my left hand over here. I'm going to tap the rhythm with my pen. Right? It's basically a grid for you to map things on. This is quite straightforward, but the concept, which is simple in itself, I suppose, gets very, very useful in more complex rhythms. Now, because we don't want to just simply say da, 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 da as we go along, it's actually good to have some verbal words, shall we say, or sounds that help us do this process. So you're probably familiar with the fact that we might go 1 on the first beat, 2 on the second beat, 3 on the third beat, and 4 on the fourth beat. And when we count eighth note subdivisions in those beats, we say and, right? So this rhythm would be 1, 2, and 3, 4, and. Now that's saying it without the subdivisions. If we add in the subdivisions, we're going to just add all of those eighth notes. So it'll be 1, 2, and 3, 4, and. And whether you verbalize the subdivisions in between, or you feel it internally, or you tap along, they're all valid ways to get this subdivision working. All right, so let's now take this rhythm and just make it a little more complicated. All you have to do to make a rhythm a little more complicated is to add some ties. Let's add some ties, all right? Let's do that. So now we can see that we're not going to play a rhythm there. It's actually tied, it's extended. So how do we use our subdivision? Well, we've got our eighth notes running. That means we're going to play on the 1. We're going to play on the and of 2. And we're going to play on the 4 and the and of 4. So a little more complex, but let's use the subdivision. So we're going to count 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and you can do it with me. And we're going to tap, clap with, and probably clap. You can clap at home or tap, or you could play a guitar string. That's fine too. I'm going to tap my pen. So I'm going to count 4 for nothing, as they say, and then we'll come in together. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. Bit more complex, right? Let's try it again. 4 for nothing. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 right? Now let's see, I'm moving pretty fast, but you can practice this on your own. Now let's see if we can do this without verbalizing the subdivisions, all right? 1, 2, 3, 4. Right? Did that work for you? So I was still feeling it, I was still thinking it, those subdivisions, and using them to help guide my rhythm. And so magically, it starts to come together. Now, this is a bit of an irregular rhythm, but if you start to repeat it and play it fast enough, 1, 2, 3, 4. Then it starts to become something you recognize. It becomes a pattern. It's pattern recognition. That's why when you're playing in an ensemble and there's a new rhythm introduced, let's say at the summer school, which we so dearly look forward to the next one when we can, at the summer school you might be introduced to an interesting rhythm that you don't know how to play on day 1, but by day 5 you've got it down pat. That's because you've played it through, you've sort of processed it, memorized it, become familiar with it, and now when you read it, it becomes something very familiar. A really good example of this would be this kind of rhythm, which would be, yeah, I think that's right. Yeah. This, right? That rhythm, if you had it in a piece of music, you might read it and it might be confusing, but if you now you've heard it, you probably have heard that before, like, oh yeah, I know that, it's kind of like a tango-y type thing, right? That's often referred to as a milonga rhythm. If I saw that on a piece of paper, because I've taught this rhythm and I've played it so many times, I'd be like, milonga rhythm. I don't actually have to read the rhythm. I'm just delving into my archives of rhythms and going, milonga rhythm. If I did this, what's that? What's that rhythm? Right? There's a bit of a tango rhythm that you might find in like the Isaac Albéniz rhythm. Now, similarly, these rhythms might be like, you'd have to work them through, but once you get them into your ear, into your mind, they become familiar. So, let's now go down to the next level, a very practical level of subdivision. That would be sixteenths, right? So, I'm trying to remember the rhythm I had at the beginning of the lesson. All right, so subdivision in 16th notes, we're going to use the verbalization of 1, E, and A, right? And as we continue on, it will be 2, E, and A, 3, E, and A, 4, E, and A, running out of space, E, and A. So, if we had the same rhythm as before, something similar to that. 1 E and 2 E and 3 E and we don't really need all of this extra information. However, it can be useful to have more information at a slow tempo. At a slow tempo, especially if you're playing in an ensemble, if there are long notes, right? 1, and you have to go with the group, and it's a long note. Then having those long notes line up rhythmically and accurately can actually be helped by, let's say, actually the rhythm here would be, right? So let's say it's a long half note. Something like that. Oh, and now I've clicked something. What have I done? I'm not sure what happened there. But it's a long note, right? That sort of half note, and then we have to land on that 3. So long. Lining that up with an ensemble member is quite tricky. However, if you're both subdividing, it can be another way of partitioning that beat to be very, very accurate. So let's say it's very slow. 3, let's give a whole bar for nothing. 1 E and 2 E and 3 E and 1 E and 2 E and 3 E and 1. Right? So it's really going to help you keep a steady, accurate rhythm that will help, especially in ensemble situations. However, this is going to be most useful for playing 16th notes. Now, the rhythm that gives most people trouble and that I'd like you to feel very confident about is the dotted rhythm. So when we have a note and it has a dot, you add half of its duration. So we have an eighth note, half of an eighth note is a 16th note, so we're going to hold that for the equivalent of 3 16th notes. So this rhythm here, I'll just make it very simple. I'm just going to have those 2 beats. This little, I don't know what kind of word I want to describe. I don't want to brand a 16th note with a naughty word. So this guy, or gal, or thing, it's been a long day already, offers up a lot of difficulty. I know it seems simple, and it will seem very simple after this, but it very often gets loose in terms of its placement. It often gets played as a triplet. So playing a true dotted rhythm is actually quite a skill, and it's got a very particular sound. How do we do it? Well, we just use subdivision, right? Easy enough. 1 E and 2 E and 1 E and 2 E and we play it on the 1 and we play on the 2. 1 E and 1 E and 2 E and 1 E and 2 E, right? So that's going to keep us locked in to this rhythmic grid. I just want to, sorry, I misjudged my spacing. I'm going to put it out to 4/4. Just also trying to look on the screen. So 1 E, dear. School teachers are going to be shaking their heads at me right now. He doesn't even know how to use a whiteboard. 1 E and 2 E. It's going to fit. All right. So let's see if we can get a rhythm going here. Let's start with something that will just be able, nice and simple, to test our ability to play this dotted rhythm. Right? Okay. And I know I'm not the most amazing handwriting person in the world, but that's okay. You know, it's okay. All right, so the goal of this, it's relatively straightforward, is that we need to be very accurate with our placement of these 16th notes. So we're going to play on the 1, the 2, and 3, 4. All right, let's do this together, 1 bar, 4 beats for nothing, and it'd be very, very accurate. So counting with me, 1 E and 2 E and 3 E and 4 E and 1 E and 2 E and 3 E and 4 E and now I'm sure some of you probably forgot about these eighth notes. Let's do that one more time. So it's different rhythm on that second beat. A little faster now. 1 E and 2 E and 3 E and 4 E and 1 E. 2 E and 3 E and 4. Nice, nice. So the rhythm that doesn't come up too often, but I want to include it, is this, where we actually have, if this is long short, then this, nope. This would be short, long, right? So it's kind of the opposite of this. If this is long, short, short, long, right? So let's try this rhythm now. You don't have to think hard at all other than playing along with these subdivisions. Ready? I'm going to start on 3 so it's not such a long lead in. 3 E and 4 E and 1 E, 2 and 3 E, 4. Let's try that again. 3 E and 4 E and. Okay, so this is the kind of thing you can practice on your own to get this really dialed in. I came across a term from a percussionist where they talk about tuning rhythm. We often talk about tuning our strings, and it's very fine tuning to get it just right. Same thing can happen with rhythm. Just to give you a little bit of an example of what we often get. I'm not going to go into triplets this time, but I want to, instead of here's what we're going to do. The first one, I'm actually going to play a triplet. And this is not for us to count along together. I'm just going to, and then the second one, I'm going to play the subdivision, right? This is the difference between, I'm going to take that out because it's going to confuse people. This is the difference between what a triplet might sound like compared to this 16th note rhythm. And this is where, that's when I say it gets loose, this is where it often gets loose. So 1, 2, 3, 4. Da, 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 right? So what I'm doing is the triplets go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 2, 2, 3, 3, 2, 3, 4, 2, 3. And this dotted rhythm goes da, 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 as opposed to dee, da, 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 da. It's a very subtle difference, but it is different. So I'll just play this rhythm through for you, and then I want us maybe to clap or play something together as well. Okay, so 1, 2, 3, 4. I'm doubting myself now, but this is the difference, right? These are triplets, and then this is 16th. So if we were doing this rhythm with triplets, dee, da, da, dee. So in a scale, as opposed to dotted rhythms, very close, aren't they? But different. And that's why the subdivision is not only going to be good for you to figure out a rhythm in a piece of music, it's also going to help you to play it accurately. All right, I want to go now. I'm going to say hello on the big screen, hello. And I just want to check in with a piece of music and, you know, look at a real world example. Just making sure. Is this going to work? Is this a screen? Thank you, Hans. No sound. All right. So yes, I changed something, but now I'm back. Yes, this is the Prelude by Robert Divisé, and I just wanted to focus in on this rhythm here because it's one that gives people a little bit of trouble when playing it. So gonna work? Yeah, okay. Within this rhythm, we actually have some subdivision built in. If we're thinking of this as 16th notes, right? One, we're on the beat 2, yeah, we're on beat 4. So this would be 4, E, and there's our subdivision, right? Now we actually have notes. This is on the the and the 4. So all we're missing is the E, if you like. 4, E, and So we can actually use sometimes music, the music that we already have, the notes that we have, for our subdivisions to keep everything nice and steady. One way to think of this rhythm, just to make sense of it, is just to play on a single line, adding in that note there. I know this is messy, but let's say rhythmically it would be da, right? 4, and that's all it is. And it's easier to hear on one string or clapping the rhythm, but if we're to put it in 2 voices, right? It sounds a little more complex, but if you think about it, 4, E, and 1, 4, E, and 1. So that subdivision really helps line everything up. So using 16th note subdivision here is going to help dramatically. One thing that does help a lot, I wonder if there might be a better spot that has a better example. One technique that I suggest a lot, if a rhythm is hard to count, let's just take this moment, oops, all right, yeah, let's take this moment down here, okay? We've got a dotted rhythm, and we have an ornament as well, so it's actually, right, a lot of things going on there. First thing, get rid of the ornament. Next thing is to think of the subdivision. It looks like it's on the second beat, so it'd be 2, E, and 3, right? 2, E, 2, E, and 3. 2, E, and 3. Now, I often find that people still have a little bit of trouble lining up these. So what I suggest is actually to add in notes artificially just to make an audible subdivision. So that would sound like this. You play it once with the audible subdivision. Sorry. Then another time without it. It really helps to shore up that melody, to fine-tune that melody and to make it more comfortable. Here is a really nice example at the end here of a case where subdivision is going to help us make sure we play this for the right length. Okay, so let's zoom out a little bit to get context. We've had from the top, from here we've gone. First thing to help with the melody, I took out this ornament. Just ignore it as we're figuring out rhythms. Now, if you listen before, we've got straight 16th notes. 1, E, and 2, E, and 3. If you keep those 16th note subdivisions going, it's really going to help you place this D. Let's see. Could we do it with 8th notes? Absolutely. 3 and 4. Right? So it really helps sometimes to place notes with those longer durations, just as it helps us with these shorter durations with dotted rhythms. Right? So subdivision. Sorry, I put the guitar stand so far away today. Subdivision is such a fantastic tool for one, figuring out rhythms, two, tuning those rhythms to make sure they're accurate. And a good example is the triplet versus the dotted rhythm, dotted 16th note. And of course, we talked on sort of three levels there, quarter notes, eighth notes, and 16ths, but it could be applied to any duration. One thing to have a nice moment of recognition is when you see some fast music, or a lot like 30-second notes, 64th, all these tails to the notes, realizing that they're just durations and they're divisions of durations. They become much more manageable and less intimidating because they don't necessarily mean fast. They're just divisions. They're just dividing things up. If you had a pizza and you cut it into 4 slices, they're big slices, but yeah, nice 4. Cut them into 8 smaller slices, cut them into 16. It's still just a pizza, and they're just divided up, right? It's no more complex. They're just dealing with durations. So you can take any rhythm that you find and use those subdivisions to map where those, like, if they're tied, if there are arrests, if they're dotted, if there's, any kind of syncopated. This is an absolutely useful tool for the rest of your musical life that will serve you really, really well. So I hope this has been clear on subdivision and that it will be a good tool for you moving forward. Now, I haven't been paying attention to the chat. I know Nikki and Dave are in there, but does anyone have any questions on subdivisions? First of all, I hope you enjoyed that little presentation and it was of interest. I know a lot of you have heard me talk about this before, but I do think sometimes it's good to be at a point with certain musical things where you're so over it. I've heard this a million times. I understand it. I get it. I do it. Great. That's where you want to be, right? You want to be all over some of these things because they're so fundamental. So let me just go back through a few things and see what's going on. So Jenny asked, can you explain about the one, has the E come from? Okay, so Jenny, the use of those particular sounds, one, E, and is a little bit arbitrary. You want to use sounds that are easy to say and sort of flow. So let's say if you said one, g, t, like you're using different, like your mouth is asked to do quite nimble things as opposed to something that flows. There are many other sounds that you can use to subdivide. I often, when I'm just sort of doing it kind of based on sound, I kind of use, I think Indian music uses a lot of because the t uses the tongue at the front on the upper teeth, d is like the tongue at the top of your mouth, k is at the back, so you can get you can just sort of make takademi is also another common one. All sorts of sounds that you can use that make those rhythms easily, and they're all just as valid. I just have happened to latch onto one E and a, two E and a. I think most questions were about Nikki's birthday, to be honest. So I'm interested to know if you want to tell me about any rhythmic struggles, because we will have some other rhythmic workshops as well. If you have any other rhythmic, not concerns, but any things that you struggle with that maybe I could address in another rhythmic workshop. Subdivision is the #1 tool that I use to figure out rhythms. It's just so useful, in different situations, and it's a tool that can kind of disassemble any complex rhythm to divided easy parts. So Martin was asking about hemiolas. Yeah, I could talk about some interesting sort of triplets and hemiolas and interesting rhythms next time. Jenny's saying, because Jenny's getting information from multiple sources there in the chat. Kerry asked about odd key signatures. No, I think you mean time signatures. Odd time signatures like 12/8 or 9/8 when increasing time. It's hard to count to 12 or 9. Yeah, right. Yeah, I mean, grouping. So there's 9/8, 12/8, 9/8, 6/8, and 3/8 are called compound time signatures, and that means we've got 3 beats. Sorry, 3 notes to a beat. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Da, dee, da, da. And you're asking about counting to 12. I totally understand. That's why I just went off the rails then. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Nice and easy to verbalize. 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. Not so easy to verbalize 10, 11, 12. That's a good question. I very rarely have had to verbalize all 12 subdivisions. I'd be interested, Nikki and Dave, or anybody else for that matter, if you have any verbal subdivisions for those. But I would say it's often in 12/8, you're actually counting it as 4. And you're just hearing those 4 major pulsos. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. It's amazing how difficult it can be count to 4 when you're doing all these things. This is a good one. Jacques asked, how do you count the thrills? Well, that's a whole nother podcast, a whole nother conversation. The trills. How do you count the trills? You can actually practice trills rhythmically. That would be interesting for another conversation. But you can think of them rhythmically as dee da dee da dee da da dee da da dee da da da. You can kind of practice them as eighth, triplet, 16th notes, and then start to sort of round off the edges, if you will, to make them a bit smoother. But also, I would like to learn how to count the thrills. Yeah. Oh, Stephen says, strategy for keeping in time with several voices at once. Top, middle, bottom, and so on. It's a little bit... Stephen, it's a good question. It's a really good question. And I sort of alluded to it. I talked about it a little bit before. Sorry, I'm just setting up my little whiteboard again. Is this going to work? Yeah, sure. So before we saw in the divisé, right, we had this rhythm. So we had these bass notes and then these upper notes, and that's complex. It's tricky. So if you think of them on the subdivision, we've got 1, let's say this is on a beat 1, right? 1, there's nothing on the E, we've got the and they got the A. So we could also think of this rhythm as this. This is sort of what I was getting at. I don't think I made it very explicit. So they're the same rhythm. They just, it's to be made more complex when they're on different strings. So da 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 da. Sorry, da 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 is the same as da da da. Have a listen to the 2. Right, the first rhythm, if we have it, I'm playing the downbeat. Sorry, that's the rhythm. Sounds more complex. If you played it all on one string, it would be. Try and hear that now. Same, but it's obscured. All right, so that thinking of them on one line and sort of squashing them together. Similarly, we might, we kind of do the same thing with arpeggios, right? We have an arpeggio, and then when we analyze something, we think of them as stacked. So similarly, we're kind of stacking the rhythm onto one simple rhythm there. So that's what I would suggest for that. It's a really good question. I still have it on how do you count the thrills. Triplets fit into subdivision. I was going to do that today, but I knew it was going to run over. So I have a really nice way to talk about counting triplets, and maybe we'll do that next time, Michelangelo. 6/8 with 16ths count. Oh, so Dave's saying 1 and 2. Yeah, right. Oh, with 16. Yeah. So if you have 16th notes and 6/8, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 5 and 6 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 5 and 6 and. So that works. Yeah, and Brent is saying, yes, compound meters 6/8 felt in 2, 9/8 felt in 3, and 12/8 felt in 4. Yeah. And yes, they depend on how fast. Of course, you can, if you had a very slow in 12/8, that would actually give you more reason to subdivide and count out all those 12 beats because it's so slow and you're partitioning them. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. And it works because it's slow and you can enunciate it. But at faster tempi, it's not that valuable because you're going 1, 2, 3, 4, da, da, ya, da, da, dee, da, 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 da. So just marking out those larger beats is better. And Hans is saying ta and t come to mind. Yeah, there are a lot of verbalizations that are very useful. Well, it's 4:54, very civilized time to wrap things up. Thank you very much, everyone, for tuning in. I hope you've all been well. I think I might do some more rhythm. I think we'll talk about, let me write them down. We'll talk about our compound meters a little bit. 6/8. We'll talk about our triplets. I think triplets over duplets and things like that. We can have some fun games with that, actually. And that subdivision works very well. What else do we have? Hemiola, right? We'll see what we can. And then Martin was saying, I still have problems with the dotted rhythms in exercise 18.6 last line. A little awkward, like you said, to have the 16th notes as the first one. Uno momento, por favor. Un momento, por favor. Finding the... Martin is referring to an exercise out of the technical routines. 18.6. Right. So Martin's talking about... We touched on this before, but he's talking about this rhythm. Yep. Right? Da-da, da-da. And so the tricky thing, I will tell you from experience, is that people start to gravitate. They move the beat, basically. This is a far less frequent rhythm. So there's the beat, 1, 2, 3, and we're going 1 E, 2 E, 3 E, 4 E. But what tends to happen is the beat over time gets shifted to here, to the second note, and it ends up going da, 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 which is the other version of this long. I think of them basically as long and short, right? Long, short, long, short, long. So the trick with getting this top rhythm here really accurate is to be very clear that you're playing on the beat with these first notes. It tends to slip. It tends to turn into a kind of an upbeat because we feel it of ba-ba, ba-ba, ba-ba. But we need to go da-da, da-da, da-da. One way to perhaps deal with that is to accent the first one, right? So we can feel the beat a bit more. Di-da, 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 as opposed to da-da, da-da, da-da. Right? It's very easy to flip and switch between the two of them. So I think accenting it nice and heavily on the beats and just being very present with it and not letting it slide will be very helpful. Cindy, you're very welcome. Thank you for your kind words. Stephen, thank you. Yeah, there's been some great workshops and Dave's been doing, Nikki and Dave, so all good. Thank you to Nikki and Dave. I don't thank you enough on these live streams. Thank you for being in there and saying hello to everyone and helping them out. And Brent, thank you. Brent is a very knowledgeable musician, and yes, some of these are tricky to explain, and yeah, thank you. I'm glad that they came across. All right, everyone. Well, take care. I'll see you in the Academy. I'll see you on Thursday. We might do another thing on another rhythm thing on Thursday. I'll keep you all in suspense. Maybe we'll play a piece. There's really no way of knowing. But take care, everyone. I'll see you soon, and be well. Bye.